Hi, I'm Kristen.
Hi, I'm Michelle.
We're readers and writers.
We're sci-fi and fantasy fans, and this is the best of all worlds.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And today on our podcast, we are going to chat about a concept that can be sometimes controversial within the book world. Some people love them, some people hate them. It's prologues and epilogues.
Yes, the best part of the book. No, just kidding. Actually, I don't know what's the best part of the book. That would be a whole nother conversation. But I will say I've seen a lot of people actively angry about the concept of a prologue being in a book.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that goes around reader circles and writer circles. Oh, never have a prologue, never have an epilogue. Don't do that. It gets talked about, but they still get written anyway. So we wanted to kind of dive into that and explore, prologues, epilogues. When are they good? When are they not? And which one do each of us prefer?
And I'll just add on to that last comment about writers. And I've even seen I've been watching a lot of editing videos on YouTube, obviously, as I prepare for my story, and the consistent consensus is don't have a prologue, which makes me actively upset. I love prologues, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get into that. I love them.
So yeah, I suppose that answers prologues or epilogues. Which do you prefer?
Yeah, it's close. I would say it's pretty close, and depending on the execution could change which I prefer within a book itself. But on average, I would say I prefer prologues.
And I'm the other way around. Also, not a super strong opinion. I can enjoy a prologue and an epilogue, but I tend to like epilogues better, and I'll be more mad if I don't get an epilogue I wanted than if I don't get a prologue I wanted.
Meanwhile, I'm over here we could just drop the epilogues. It's fine.
I want to know what happens.
Oh, well, maybe before we dive too much into specifics, what would you say is the purpose of each, a prologue and an epilogue?
Sometimes I think prologues and epilogues are not used for their intended purpose, which is part of the problem. But I would say that a prologue done right is giving the reader information that the main characters do not have.
Right.
So whether that's a different timeline or a different character's point of view, or even the prologue's a letter or something that the characters have not seen. I think that is where a prologue is done best. It's effectively just giving the reader information that the characters don't have.
Ah, so a little dramatic irony.
Which I can see why you like it.
Yes. The best prologues definitely come from a point of view that is unrelated to the main story. I really don't like if a prologue is from one of the main point of view characters. That is going to make me just be again, why not just make that a chapter at that point? Because it kind of defeats the purpose of a prologue, unless it's so far in the past. Potentially that could work. But what about an epilogue then?
Yeah, I'd say for an epilogue, what I want from an epilogue is I want to tie up dangling threads that feel like they need to be answered. I'm going to want an epilogue to answer the unanswered questions that weren't done purposefully. So I'm saying that because there are some books that specifically have an ambiguous ending for a reason, and I want to respect that because sometimes an ambiguous ending is the best choice.
Right.
But when you've got a huge epic fantasy or sci-fi story and there's a bunch of different characters and there's a bunch of threads going on, especially in those cases, I want an epilogue because there are so many things that you can't really tie up unless you skip ahead a little bit and see where the characters are at. That's when an epilogue, I think, is at its most useful, is to tie up threads that could not otherwise be tied up within the regular plot line.
Meanwhile, my favorite epilogues are ones that ask a new question or maybe like set off a new mystery or something. Those are always my
Yeah.
favorite.
And I mean, that's good too. Honestly, I'd say both. I'd say
Okay.
both. You gotta tie up the threads, but I like it when you tie up the threads and then like
Mm,
kind of send another one out there that's like, oh, that's cool. The
right.
characters are gonna go off and do that. And it feels like they have like, a future
Right.
outside of what's happening in the epilogue. So yeah, that's a good clarification. Is I don't want an epilogue that just wraps everything up in a bow and says they all lived happily ever after. I just want answers to the questions that have been
Mm,
nagging in the back of my mind,
right.
and then give me a hint at something exciting may happen in the future. Like that's what I'm here for, and that's what my favorite epilogues. I've got a couple examples very much do.
Interesting. Well, I'm definitely interested to hear your examples because when I was thinking of epilogues, I really couldn't think of a lot of example of epilogues that stand out to me. Though in general, my impression of an epilogue is just like a final image, like a lasting image that you close the book and you're just thinking about for a little bit. So the examples that I have definitely fulfill that purpose, but let's put a little pin in that and go back to our conversation on prologues, because prologues come first
It's true.
chronologically. um,
Imagine putting an epilogue at the
yeah,
start of your
that'd be
book.
so funny.
That would actually be, I would read that because I would be so confused and like,
Yes.
what is happening?
I love a little confusion as the opening of the story. Actually, I say that with a silly tone, but genuinely I do love that.
Yeah.
Um
Okay, wait, nobody steal this idea. I want to write a book that starts with an epilogue.
yes, I'm excited. I'm excited. But I more or less categorize prologues into three main categories of the type that I like from prologues. So we have one that would be historical context. So it is maybe a myth or maybe an unrelated character doing something scientific. I read a lot of sci-fi, so there's usually they're messing with science in some way. Or the world history of some sort, like something that's going to be relevant to the rest of the story. That's one
Hmm.
type of prologue. The next is to see the bad guy's point of view. This is a pretty common type of prologue where we see Pettigrew and Voldemort at the start. That's kind of an example of seeing the bad guys. And then we have the in media res prologues, which are probably my number one favorite, where we start in the middle of the action of everything happening and then we turn back time and go and figure out how we got there. So that might not always be considered a prologue when they start it in media res, but a lot of times it is. So those are the three major categories that I thought of for prologues that I enjoy.
Yeah, I'd say the only one I'd add in, I kind of mentioned earlier, but sometimes you'll see a prologue that's like in the form of like some other type of
Mm,
media,
right.
like a letter that was recovered or like messages or someone's
Mm-hmm.
writing a statement about the events that are going to happen in the story from like the far future point of view, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
that is also, I think, it's probably less common, but it's definitely a type of prologue that I've seen and can definitely be effective just by virtue of being in another medium from the rest of the story.
Exactly. And I think that's a good segue into talking about what makes one effective or not effective. And we were kind of discussing this a little bit before. I think we both agree that length does, in fact, matter.
Yeah, so I've got a couple examples to share with you. One of a really good prologue and one of a really not good prologue. And guess what? They're
Amazing.
from the same series because
Classic.
it's 14 books long. That's right, it's Wheel of Time.
Actually, Wheel of Time has one of my more favorite prologues as well. So,
Yeah. But I think the opening prologue in the first Wheel of Time book, I'm going to talk about these with no spoilers, by the way. So don't have to worry about that. But the opening prologue is basically it takes place in the past from where our story is going to be. So it's got that timeline factor, but it's showing, a hero and a villain, and it's very much related to like the fundamental like corruption that exists in the modern day time of when the main series takes place. Like honestly, you're seeing kind of where it all started back like centuries ago, and that moment kind of led to where we are today. And it's very powerful in that way. Not only is it just like kind of like a cool like dramatic scene, but it also very much like sets the tone for what the rest of the story is going to be. And
Oh,
like you
yeah.
kind of understand the stakes here. It was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't think Wheel of Time was anywhere near as dark as it was until I read the prologue, and I'm like, wait a second. Okay.
Wait a second. Okay, minor spoiler, but there's a lot of people who died in the prologue,
There's lots
so
of death. We know that I love a book that starts with death, so it's my favorite kind.
but yeah. So like that is an example of a really good prologue. Like it hooks you from the beginning. It's the first thing you read in the series. It sets the tone for the rest of the series, gives you some really important like historical background information. And then you get like, 10 books later and suddenly you've got prologues that are like 90 pages long that like you know that saying where it's like this meeting could have been an email. That's how I feel about
Yeah.
those prologues. It's like this prologue could have just been chapters. You did not need
Yeah.
to put all of this into one chunk and call it a prologue. Like that's not a prologue. That's just a third of your book. Like,
No wonder they call it the slog. Like,
yeah. To be fair, Crossroads of Twilight, which is 100% the sloggiest book in the whole series, does this, but so does Knife of Dreams, which is the book after that, and it's actually one of my favorite books in the series. So,
interesting.
I guess I got past the prologue, but dang, those prologues are just like, no.
That's
Prologues
funny.
should be short and to the point and not involve like 5 different main character point of views who you're gonna see in like the main chapters of the series because
That's
they are point of view
crazy.
characters. I'm like, no,
Wait, that's so
don't do
confusing.
that.
My brain
It's
is trying to
so confusing.
contextualize how this all works
It
as a
doesn't make any
prologue.
sense. It really doesn't. I love Wheel of Time dearly. Like it is one of my favorite series. But I cannot for the life of me understand how those prologues are prologues. They are not.
It's funny that you brought up the first Wheel of Time book for the prologue because I thought that one was good, but I preferred the prologue in The Great Hunt, the second book of the series.
Interesting.
I liked that one way more. And I think why is because it felt more like an immediate threat. We're watching a group of baddies do their baddie stuff, and you're just like, okay, are we going to run into these characters? Are they going to be like directly antagonistic to the main characters? So it felt like, in a way, the stakes were higher, even though obviously we know what the stakes are given the first prologue. But
Yeah.
something about the second prologue, it felt more immediately dangerous, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And the second prologue is also good. I think I prefer the first one just because the second one is like I spent the whole time trying to be like, who is this character? Have we met them before? Are they important? Why are we in their point of view? And then I just got too caught up in that. And
I just went in, I'm like assuming we're going to see this character at some point. They're going to be directly antagonistic to the character. We're going to have to figure out which one they are. That was my take on it. It was like, okay, who is this person? I need to be on the lookout for them for the rest of however long. Maybe the book, I'm guessing. But
yeah. No, it's definitely I think overall the early Wheel of Time prologues are very good, and then the late Wheel of Time prologues are very not. So
which is disappointing.
it's fine.
It
I
is
can't remember what
disappointing.
happens when Sanderson takes over if he has also ridiculously long prologues. I cannot recall, but I just remember being in the middle of the series and getting to the point where I'm like, why is this prologue 100 pages long? What am I reading?
That's
Why
too
is it
long
not over yet?
by any metric. That's not a
Yeah.
prologue.
Nope,
That's a
it
part.
sure isn't.
That is a full part. That
This
is
meeting
part
could
one.
have been an email.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But when we were kind of talking about historical context prologues, I really did want to bring this one up because even though it's been years since I read this book, the prologue still really stands out to me. And I really, really liked it. It's from Rage of Dragons, which is kind of like a Afro fantasy type story. But the prologue is none of the main characters. It is a major epic battle that takes place in the past and informs a lot of the mythology and the stories that they tell each other throughout the story. So it's really interesting to see how it's depicted in the prologue versus how they talk about it and how it impacts the behavior of all those people in the book because of that historical context. Like, they know this story, but do they know the exact version of the story that we read? I'm not so confident about that because that's just how humans are with time and pressure and politics and all that. So I thought that was a really effective prologue, and the imagery still like sticks in my mind, even though it's completely like at a surface level completely unrelated to the main story, but it's also very integral, which I liked.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily the prologue doesn't necessarily have to be part of the main story,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, I think it's sometimes better when it isn't.
I
So,
agree. And then I think in general, the number one thing that will bug me about a prologue is when it's only really there as a sort of like cool scene and the relevance to the main story is flimsy, if even at all there. Well, it's just like, okay, this would be cool. Like, just write a short story and put it in a collection of short stories. Keep that to yourself. Like, unless it's directly relevant to the story, that's where I feel like prologues can get off the wall. And I feel like a lot of times people do that because they're like, oh, this would be really cool. It's in the same world as the story, etc. Or it's like a mythos of the story. But is it directly relevant? I mean, maybe I've been writing too much short fiction, like short stories and stuff, but the main purpose of a short story is to make sure that everything that's brought up has a purpose and you're not wasting words. And I do think about that on a grander scale of the story as well. So a nonsense prologue is probably my least favorite.
that's true. Like there's a line between not being tied into the main plot and not being relevant at
Right.
all.
Right, exactly.
And you gotta walk that very carefully.
Exactly, which can be difficult, but yeah, at the end of the day, I like a story with a prologue, unless the prologue is going to be 90 pages, in which case, please.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I harped on it too much, but yeah, that's just it's too long. It's too long.
That's okay. It deserves being harped on. A 90 page it's not a prologue at 90 pages. I'm sorry. There's
No.
there's no world in which that's still a prologue, even if you put prologue at the start. Like, no.
It's a prologue because it says so right here.
Any other thoughts on prologues before we move on to the epilogue?
I think I'm ready to move on to epilogues.
All right. So, in your opinion, what is the purpose of an epilogue in the story? I know you've kind of already said it, but maybe we can expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, so as we were talking about earlier, I think an epilogue is best suited as a way to tie up the dangling threads that are going to bother the readers, and also, yeah, give like a little like glimpse into what the future might look like, whether it's like days, months,
Mm.
years down the line from where the story last took place. I'd say my favorite ones honestly tend to be shorter time gaps. So,
Okay.
like, I don't love it when it skips like way, way, way far, maybe like 2 years max. And I'm like, okay, that's a good skip where like you are still relatively close to what's
Right.
happening to the characters. I'd say anything like longer than 2 years is like, okay, now you're just pushing it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people change a lot in a very short period of time. That's kind of like
Uh-huh.
one of the biggest realizations a person can have reading a novel is that people change pretty fast given the right context and circumstances. So to have a more, even 2 years kind of feels like a long time because people can change so much within a
Yeah.
5, 10, 15 year time gap that they're a different person at that point. So unless you're leaning into they've become a different person really heavily, and I can't say that I can think of any examples off the top of my head that actually do that. Actually, the one that I can think of that has a huge time skip I hate, and I was going to bring it up. So here's a perfect
Here.
time to bring it up. And that is Harry Potter Book 7. I loathe the epilogue for Harry Potter Book 7 because what it feels like is a nice, shiny red bow that's just. It doesn't even feel like fan service either. It feels like it's there for the author to be done with the story and have no room for questions.
Yeah, it's definitely the way I like to put it is I think conceptually having like I thought it was like 7 years later or something like
I think
that
it's because their kids are old
from
enough to go to school, so it's probably closer to
oh no,
20.
it would be longer than that.
Yeah, it's probably closer to 15 to 20. Yeah.
But however many years later it is, I think that conceptually could have worked just based on the recurring metaphor of the kids setting off for
Mm-hmm.
like Hogwarts. That thematically could have worked, but the way it was executed was just like, and everything's the same as it was back like 14 years
Yeah.
ago. Everyone married who they were dating. Everyone's pretty much the same. There was not really anything that showed the progression that
Right.
would have gone on during that time other than the fact that
Children have
children
been
are
born.
there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's not really enough in my
Yeah.
opinion. So it could have worked, but I didn't love the way it was executed.
Exactly. And that's why I dislike it so much because it really took away from everything that this. I mean, at the end of book 7, you have that giant reveal. That would change a person. I'm sorry. That
Mhm.
whole event would change a person. And yet we're just expected to believe he's a happy go lucky, got a kid now, married to the same his high school sweetheart. Like, that's just so unrealistic.
Yeah. It could have been better, but that's what fan fiction is for.
That is what, and some of my favorite fan fiction is Harry Potter fan fiction. They did
Listen,
it better.
I'm writing Harry Potter fan fiction plus Full Metal Alchemist,
And
but
that's making it great.
I can do whatever I want with the epilogue
Yes,
because the story's not the same anyway.
exactly. But it's funny that you like epilogues that kind of close everything off. I like epilogues that open up new questions. So I have two different examples of different types. So, and I mentioned this in our Gate of the Feral Gods video, but if you didn't listen to that podcast episode, that's totally fine. It's the 4th book in a series. But for the purposes of this discussion, the epilogue shows a completely different point of view from the main characters, and they are interacting with a person that has been mentioned many times throughout the story but has yet to show their face. So we're finally getting an answer to where that person has been. So in a way, we're closing off that string, kind of. But the bigger question is, what are they going to do with this now that this has all happened? So it opens a huge question that makes you want to continue going on into the series to see what happens. And then the other one I was thinking of was an epilogue that serves as a plot twist. And I love a plot twist just in general, so throwing it in the epilogue can be really fun. And I was thinking of this one novel, which is technically a mystery called Do You Remember? The whole time the character can't remember what's happened to them. And as they learn throughout the story, they realize something pretty major about their life. And the epilogue goes and tells us, yeah, that thing that you thought was really major actually that's not what's happening at all. So it was just like a really fun plot twist that kind of added a little bit of tragedy to the situation while also adding hope at the same time. If such a thing were even possible, it somehow manages to do both with that little reveal, and I like it. I liked it a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another example of, I'm pretty sure, apologies if this is not correct because it's been a while since I read it. I think And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie also has its biggest plot twist in the epilogue.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly.
That's a good place to put a plot twist because, like I said, an epilogue is like kind of that final image that you're left on with a book that kind of lets you think and linger on the concepts from the book. So that's a great place to put a plot twist and just let the reader kind of sink all that in and have no story to go from. They just have to sit there and think about what they just read. I love it.
I mean, that is definitely interesting. I'd say it's not my preference. And I think I'm not explaining well. So I want to clarify. I've got two examples of epilogues that I really like that I'm not going to say anything about what actually happens. I'm just going to talk super vaguely because they're both series ender epilogues, and really that's the kind of epilogue I like, is really long series epilogue, because there's so many characters that I've gotten attached to and I want to know where they're going next. And I think it's not so much like tying up the thread and it's a knot and it's done. It's like, okay, the thread went here and this is the direction the thread's going after. It's like a jumping off point to the next adventure. Like that's what I want in an epilogue. So, for example, Wheel of Time. I'm bringing up Wheel of Time again. Sorry, this is a Wheel of Time heavy episode, but
nothing wrong with that.
The epilogue of Wheel of Time, it very much does both. It's like, okay, these characters are doing this right now. These characters are doing this right now. Like, where did they end up at the end of the story, and where's that going to take them going forward? Like, that's what's interesting to me in an epilogue, is I want to know what life trajectory the characters have been set on, whether it's for good or for ill. I want to know. I'm curious about where they're going. And yeah, sometimes it's not going to be completely wrapped up, but sometimes it's also you just want to, you're like, is this character going to choose this or this? If that's been a dilemma the whole time and then you don't get to see it, you're like, really? So that's sometimes you need that epilogue to understand, like, this is probably an epic fantasy reader problem, but like there are some like character arcs that are so long and dramatic and complex that you simply just can't resolve them without like skipping ahead a little bit.
I see. Okay. As somebody who doesn't read a lot of epic series in general.
Yeah. Shorter books, I feel like, are in less need of epilogues, but longer series, like obviously Wheel of Time is a 14-book series. Another example I have is Skyward, which is a 4-book series. That one also has an epilogue. I really like the epilogue in that one, and it's very similar to Wheel of Time in the way that it's like, okay, this is what the characters have decided to do after the big finale, grand hurrah. This is where they're going next. This is where their character arc for the whole series took them to making the choice that I'm going to do this for the future. It's a resolution, but it's also the beginning for something new.
Right.
And also there's a really funny scene where a character just, I don't even want to spoiler it, but it's like there is actually like almost a villain perspective in the epilogue of Skyward. There's some comeuppance, and it's great. But yeah, it's
the joy in your. I don't know that I've heard this much joy.
I loved that scene.
Listen,
listen, it wasn't like they were gonna die or anything. They were just going to face the consequences of being evil bastards.
Normally Chris is all like, no, like we can't, no, we couldn't do that. I'm like, this is fun to see. The vengeance side.
Listen, I want characters who have come to realize they're bad people to have a chance at redemption, but I want characters who refuse to acknowledge that they're bad people to have
To
it
be
shoved back
punished.
in their faces. That's the difference.
There's something so petty about that I love.
It's like, if you're not going to acknowledge that you're a bad person, then I want you to feel the consequences
So
for
this
that.
is the real reason you love this epilogue. I see.
I mean, that is my favorite part of the epilogue, but I also just, it does a good job of like, okay, this is where the characters are going next. Like, this is kind of the world we're trying to build after this big giant, I won't say what because it's spoilers, but things happened, major changes are going on, and I think I just like that in an epilogue, is especially when it's a big long series, there's a grand epic finale, like world changing consequences to this grand epic finale. I want some resolution afterward. And
That's
like,
fair.
yeah, that's just it. It's like, I want to see, at least get a hint of where we're going after the world changing consequences. Because unless the character died, I want to know how all the events affected them and what direction that's pointing them in the future. So,
and is that like something that you think about afterwards? Like you consider what those consequences would be of the choices that they make? Or is it more so like so that you know the answer to those questions?
I feel like it's so in my head, I can go, I wonder what they would do based on that information. Because if I'm really attached to the characters,
Right.
like, you know, like, especially like Wheel of Time, for instance, I'm like, okay, so these characters are going to do this, and, you know, this character, oh, interesting, they're doing this, and this character's going to go over here. I bet they got it. Listen, there's one like character in Wheel of Time, I will not say who, but I'm like, I wanted their character arc to continue. I want a spin-off series because there are unresolved things that I think they would have been involved in resolving if Robert Jordan hadn't passed away, which is very sad.
Maybe we can convince Sanderson to throw that in. I mean, he writes 6 books a year. What's one more?
Yeah. I think he's spoken on the fact that he's not going to do it, but listen, there's got to be, I got to look up fanfic because I want resolution for this, okay? There's a very unresolved problem at the end of Wheel of Time that I'm like, fix this.
Fix this with fix.
But this is exactly why epilogues are important to me, is like, if you got a long series, there are some things that if you don't even address it, I'm going to be very upset. And epilogues give you more chances to address the lingering things that I want answers for. Because I haven't read this whole series just to not find out the answer to my question that I've had for like 6 books. That's rude.
Yeah, the only series that I've gotten that far into is Dresden Files, and it's still ongoing. I can't say that I've ever experienced that kind of epilogue, so I can't really fully understand what that's like. But it makes sense logically. I wish I had the context of experience, but
guess
hey,
you just gotta finish Wheel of Time.
Yeah. Maybe in 5 years when I finally finish the series. I may skip the one, Crossroads of Twilight or whatever one you said was the worst.
Yeah, it's fine. Just skip the prologue and then you're like at least like a fourth of the way through.
There you go. There you go. With all that being said, dear listener, what do you prefer? Do you prefer a prologue? Do you prefer an epilogue? Do you hate them? Either one of them? Are you the person that sees prologue and just skips forward to chapter 1? What is your preference? I'm actually curious because I've seen a lot of interesting takes lately, and the skipping prologues is just, well, I just can't imagine. I love prologues.
Yeah, no, prologues can absolutely be good, and I think just lumping in, oh, you should never have a prologue, is discounting all the ways in which prologues can really work. And same way with epilogues. Like, there are some books that probably shouldn't have an epilogue, or the kind of epilogue that they chose. But there are some books where an epilogue is absolutely called for, and I want it. So they can both be good when used wisely.
So use your time wisely and like and subscribe for beautiful, successful segues like that one and more.
Amazing. And go down to the comments to add an epilogue to our conversation.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for listening and have a good one.
See ya.